Well, we have a special guest in studio once again. Brad Edwards, 25 years at ESPN. He's from Jackson, Mississippi. Just, put together the book, Dynasty by the Numbers, on Saban's tenure at the University of Alabama. And it's storytelling through numbers, charts, and graphs. It's fantastic. Great Christmas gift. If you love Alabama, obviously it's a layup. If you have a family member or client, you want to go to BamaDynastyBook.com. And Brad's on a book tour. He was in Orange Beach, Gulf Shores early in the week. Here, he's from here. We grew up together. And then he's heading to Alabama again today, going up to Tuscaloosa a little bit later. He'll be at the game this weekend. And, Brad, you said you're signing on Saturday on campus?
On campus, yeah. I'm signing from 11 to 1 at the Soup Store, which is the campus bookstore, basically.
Cool.
There are two locations. The one that's at the Student Center or Student Union, that's the one where I'll be on Saturday.
Okay. 11 to 1. And then you're doing the equivalent of mistletoe for them at some point.
Yeah, so Alabama has a few things that are very similar to Mistletoe Marketplace, and there's one in Birmingham the first weekend of actually the first week of November. Then there's one in Mobile the second week, and then there's another one back in a different part of Birmingham the third week. And so I'm going to do all three of those in November and
cool.
See if I can find some more Alabama fans to sell books to.
Brad Edwards on the Out of Bounds show. I think you're going to do very well. All right, I gotta kind of tee this up for you and see what you think. Last night at dinner, we had a great time talking about the games this weekend.
Yep.
Ole Miss and Bama and Arkansas and Georgia. There's other good ones. You never know. We could get a great Auburn LSU game, Florida, Kentucky, even A&M, Mississippi State.
True.
But you had a great take, and I agreed with it, on your thoughts on Arkansas and Georgia and how Ole Miss is just built to be able to score and maybe win the game, make it more competitive, so on. Arkansas reminds me of when Dan Mullen had about 3 teams at Mississippi State when they were good. And Arkansas to me is like Mississippi State light when Mullen was really good for about 3 of those 9 years. In other words, but when he would run into an elite team, they didn't have the vertical spread passing game to do what they did, especially if that team had an elite defense. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so I don't know if I would I don't know if that I would say that they are exactly the same as Mississippi State, because I think Arkansas does have the vertical threats. I just don't think they have the consistency in the passing game overall. So the point is still the same. I think their receivers are maybe a little bit more explosive than State's were in those years, but they're still limited as a passing team, and ultimately I think that's why they don't match up well with Georgia. You know, Arkansas is a run-first team, and Georgia's probably the most difficult team to run the ball on in college football. And so I think it's going to be tough sledding. Obviously, last week, especially in the first quarter, Arkansas was able to use that threat of the running game to open up some opportunities for some deep shots that hit a couple big plays against A&M, and that ultimately is why they won the game, is because of the 2 big pass plays they had early.
Sure.
And, you're still going to take those shots, and you hope that you can hit them against Georgia when you get the chances. But for Arkansas to be able to beat Georgia, I think they're going to need to establish something on the ground, and it's tough to do against that team. Now, the thing that I'm really most excited to see in that game, it's not like I think Georgia's going to win easily.
Okay.
But I can't wait to see what Georgia's offense is able to do against Arkansas's defense, because Arkansas's defense is legit. And the question I have about Georgia and whether they are capable of winning the national title this year, it all comes down to how good the quarterback is. And, we saw in the season opener, JT Daniels really struggled. Then we found out afterward he was injured. I don't know when in the game he got injured. Or maybe he was injured in practice the next week. We just know he didn't play in the second game. He's come back. He's looked good against weak competition in the last 2 games. But ultimately, the question is, can he perform at a high level against a good defensive team? Because you're going to have to go through a team like that. And it's not going to be a simple matter of, hey, we're awesome on defense, we're going to hold everyone to single digits. When you get into the playoff, someone's going to score at least 20-something, if not 30-something on you. And then it's just a matter of, can you answer? Can you keep up? And I think that all comes down to how good their quarterback play is.
So you're buying the Arkansas defense, and Barry Odom is a freak and all that.
Yeah, I'm buying the Arkansas defense. I'm buying the Arkansas running game.
But if they get this thing kind of all mucked up, 11 a.m. game, Georgia may not be doing what they need to do.
Well, look, if the Georgia offense is struggling, if Arkansas's defense is able to have its way and it ends up being a low-scoring game,
right?
Then maybe they would be able to pull the upset without rushing for a ton of yards. I mean, if they're able to win the turnover battle, get a big special teams play to be able to generate some points that way. I mean, I could see Arkansas being able to win a 17-13 type game. But if Georgia's able to score in the 20s, I don't see Arkansas being able to get there just because I don't think they'll be able to run consistently enough.
But you see kind of what I was talking about with Mullen and Mississippi State.
Yeah,
and
I think you're probably referring to some of the Nick Fitzgerald teams that certainly would have fallen into that category where they were really effective. And it's similar to Arkansas. They could run the ball really well, and especially with the quarterback as a big part of it. They had they had a couple teams that were really good on defense.
Sure.
But when they needed to throw, they couldn't.
No.
And then that's why they couldn't beat the very best teams that they had to go up against.
All right, Brad Edwards on the Out of Bounds show. Let's go to Ole Miss Bama. If Ole Miss is able to pull this off, what do you think that kind of says about college football today? Because we were talking about this last night, and we've grown just until the last few years. We've grown up. You need to be good on defense.
Yeah.
Get all these stops. I mean, I still think Ole Miss is very average on defense.
Yeah, average, I think. But that's a ton better than what they were last year.
Yeah. But if they're able to do this with maybe the best offense in the country and an average defense, one, what do you think it says? And then do you think it's a wake-up call for guys like Kirby and Jimbo who we're kind of asking the question, do they see what's happening in the world of college football or in the game of football?
Yeah, I think clearly college football has become a quarterback-driven game, and I think the NFL is too. So it's not just college. But what's happened in the last few years is that the teams that are the best recruiters overall, the few teams that get all the 4 and 5 stars, they also have happened to had the best quarterbacks at the same time. And when Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, even LSU, the 1 year with Joe Burrow, when those teams have a quarterback on that level, no one is going to be able to beat them except each other. It's going to take one of the other teams in that group to knock them off. But when they don't have the best quarterback, that's when the playing field is leveled somewhat. And, you go, I know going back a lot further, but you go back to when Eli was at Ole Miss and Phillip Rivers at NC State. And you can think of some of the teams like Matt Ryan at Boston College. There were some teams that were inferior across most of the roster that were able to win some big games and get ranked pretty high.
Dak in Mississippi State.
That's another great example, State with Dak. And so, but we haven't seen that in recent years because the quarterbacks have been excellent at the teams with the best talent. And now what we're seeing is that Spencer Rattler at Oklahoma, not quite as good, maybe not close to as good as the 3 guys who came before him. I don't know that quarterback's a problem at Ohio State. I think it's defense. The defense has really fallen off. Is at Justin Fields' level. We'll see if that ends up playing out. You look at Clemson. I mean, Uiagalelei, for all of his talent, they got problems other than quarterback's not their biggest problem. It's offensive line.
Sure.
But he's not looking like Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson. And so now all of a sudden you've got these conferences that have been dominated by those teams that seem up for grabs. So the question is the SEC going to be the same way? Now, Bryce Young, I don't know if he's as good as Mac Jones and Tua. We'll see. I think he's good. I think he's potentially really good. But the players around him are not as good right now as what the last few Alabama teams have had supporting their quarterback. And I think that's what opens the door here. So Ole Miss having maybe the best quarterback in the country with an offense that can score a ton of points and should on anybody, they're going to have a chance to win this game. And if they do, look, given who they play in the crossover games, I think they got a really good shot to, go through the rest of the SEC West. And even if they lose one, they just can't lose two.
Right.
If you get to the SEC championship game, obviously, then you got a shot at getting into the playoff. But that's where we are. And so I think, just to answer your question, I think because the top teams, the teams with the most talent, aren't dominant at quarterback.
They don't have
now.
elite QBs.
Now it opens the door again for a team like Ole Miss with good talent to be able to win by having the best quarterback.
And it's an outlier year.
Yeah, it probably, like in the case of Alabama will be better next year than they are this year. So if you're Ole Miss or anybody else in the SEC, you better get them this year.
You're not impressed with this Alabama team compared to the last 4 or 5 or 4 that they've rolled out.
Right. I think
you said they may have lost more talent than anybody in the history of
college football.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so Alabama last year had 6 consensus All-Americans. They were the first team since Yale in 1909 to have 6 in one season. Okay. The first player drafted off of last year's team was Jalen Waddle, who was not one of the 6 consensus All-Americans because he missed 2/3 of the season. So when you look at the consensus All-Americans plus the first-round draft picks, and Christian Barmore, who went in the second round, was not in either of those groups. So here's another guy to throw in. You could make a great argument that no team has ever lost as much talent from as Alabama just did from 20 to 21. And yet, here they are, 4-0, ranked number 1 still. I don't know whether they're as good as everybody thinks they are, but they still have as good of talent as anybody in the country. They're just inexperienced. But I think the biggest thing with Alabama, for all the struggles on the offensive line and the struggles we saw up front defensively against Florida and all the things that fans want to obsess over, the biggest thing is that they river.
Right.
Because who does have these guys every year? But Alabama, since 2008, every season except one, 2011, had at least one eventual first-round draft pick at wide receiver on the roster. Because they had Julio, 8, 9, and 10, nothing in 11. They had Amari Cooper, 12, 13, and 14. Calvin Ridley, 15, 16, and 17. And then from 17, 18, 19, they had Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs. And then obviously Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle continued into last year. So they've had all these guys, and they don't have a first-round receiver in the rotation right now. There might be one on the roster who's a freshman who
may
hasn't
emerge next year.
Yeah, exactly. Or may emerge later this year. But at the moment, the strength of this Alabama team is its tight ends. Their passing game is going to live or die with 2 tight ends, and they're going to put them right next to each other, and they're going to say, see if you can cover both of them. And it's exactly what, like Bill O'Brien, the offensive coordinator for Alabama, the last time he was an OC was 2011 with the Patriots. And they had Gronk and Aaron Hernandez. Those 2 guys that season combined for about 2,300 receiving yards and 24 touchdown catches. And so you can win that way in the passing game. You might say, okay, you take your corners, you take our receivers out of the game, that's fine. But we're going to make your linebackers and safeties have to cover both of these tight ends on every play, and we'll see if you can do it. And Patriots were pretty good that way.
Brad Edwards on the Out of Bounds Show. Yes, they were. 105.9 The Zone, ESPN. His new book, you can find it BamaDynastyBook.com. BamaDynastyBook.com. He's on a book tour, and he'll be back several more times between now and Christmas, mostly in the state of Alabama. Brad joins us on the Modelo guest line. Yeah. Blake, you have a question for Brad Edwards.
We've talked about this, and we've danced all around the subject, so I just want to get you to put your foot down and tell me the answer. all right, we recognize that there's a bubble of quarterback play at elite programs, and I get that. But that might be microscopic. Like, there's little instances why this is this way or that is that way. I get it. Clemson went through their 2 best quarterbacks in program history. It's hard to repeat a third, right? But Georgia, Kirby Smart has been there now 6 years. Jimbo Fisher, 4 years at A&M. Neither of them have put together a succession plan of quarterbacks. Neither of them have anyone on the roster who remotely looks like an elite quarterback playmaker. If it wasn't for JT Daniels being a transfer, Georgia would be starting a walk-on. That's embarrassing in and of itself, period, regardless of who the coach is. So why, at least Alabama's following up 3 straight Heisman caliber quarterbacks with a guy who potentially down the road could be that. He shows flashes. What's going on at A&M at Georgia? They can't even sign a guy who looks like he's a top 50 quarterback in his class.
Good question.
Some of it may be the offense that they're running. I mean, I think, with Georgia, it still is a run-predicated offense. I don't know if there's the same level of excitement for quarterbacks to play in that offense as there is in some of the others. And maybe that has something to do with it. And, all it takes is one guy who puts up big numbers and gets drafted in the first round, and then all of a sudden other guys want to go play in that system. And A&M, I mean, look, Bo, you know this because from the moment that A&M paid Jimbo all that money to come be their coach, I told you I'm not a big fan.
Right.
And it's not that I don't like Jimbo or that I think he's a bad coach. I think he's a good coach. He's a really good recruiter. But when A&M made that move, they believed that that he was worth all that money because not only was he a guy who had won a national championship, but they thought they were also getting one of the best offensive minds in college football. And he had a reputation as a great play caller.
I don't know why.
And
that's not how LSU
quarterback developer.
Outside of Jameis Winston, outside
either.
of Jameis Winston's 2 seasons in Florida State, show me where as a head coach Jimbo Fisher's had a good offense. He hasn't.
Right.
He hasn't. Not one season outside of Jameis.
And that's
Winston.
not what LSU was built on from 2000 to 2005. But we kind of rolled out that narrative anyway. Go ahead, Brad.
And so what I told you is that whatever you would call the Jimbo Fisher offense, like you could just pin it down as to what this scheme is. Defensive coordinators have never feared the Jimbo Fisher offense in the way that they feared the Chip Kelly offense at Oregon or the Art Briles offense at Baylor. The Jimbo Fisher's just, he's had in most places he's had a lot of talented players where you could run he was running basically a pro style offense, and he was winning with superior talent. But he wasn't even always winning at the level he should have won. I think last year's A&M team probably won one more game than they should have based on their talent.
And they didn't have to play Ole Miss.
Didn't play Ole Miss.
And they didn't play Ole Miss. But to have gotten through that season losing only to Alabama, I would say they slightly overachieved.
Yeah.
Slightly. Other than that, the national championship team, obviously undefeated. You would have to say any team that goes undefeated kind of overachieves in college football, even if it's only by a little bit. But I'm not sure he's ever had another team that has played up to its talent level. And so he gets really good talent, and he's going to have teams that are going to, they're going to finish in the top 25, but are they really going to contend? Unless he revamps what he does offensively, I don't see it.
All right. We had somebody say that Jimbo has been kind of a trust fund baby. He's never had to win at Bowling Green like Urban Meyer or Michigan State like Nick Saban or Mississippi State like Dan Mullen or many other, or it took Dabo years and years to build.
Yep.
In other words, he walked into FSU. Clemson was not what they are today, even though they're struggling this year. And Miami was down, so it was a weak conference. He took advantage of Jameis and all that NFL talent. Other than that, he's never had to. What do you say?
Well,
to that?
I'd push back a little bit on that in that I don't think Florida State was that good when he took over.
Okay.
Now remember, he was a coach in waiting.
Sure. For
Bowden's last year was 2009, and Florida State was very mediocre at that point. I mean, Bowden had taken a great program and let it become average. Right. Now, look, was he still in the middle of a state with a ton of talent that just needed a really good recruiter to replenish the stock? Yeah. I mean, that's basically what happened. Within a couple years, he was able to get much better talent in there than what he took over, and obviously he had a couple of, well, I say he had a couple of really good teams. He had one fantastic team that won it all. Even Jameis's second year, they went undefeated through the regular season and then got blown out in the semifinal, but they had so many close calls to inferior teams during the regular season. I mean, that's the reason that Florida State was ranked, I believe it was the second to last week of the regular season. They were undefeated and ranked 4th in the selection committee rankings with, I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 one-loss teams ahead of them. But that's how unimpressive they were as an undefeated team and undefeated as a defending national champion. And they still had them ranked 4th because they were.
Who'd they get blown out by?
Oregon. Yeah.
Okay. Is that
Yeah,
when
Oregon ran
and
them. Yeah.
Ohio State played or something?
Yeah.
Wow. He let Helfrich blow him out.
He did. Yeah, he did. It was, and then obviously the Florida State program just started to come unraveled before he left.
Yeah, it did.
That wasn't, I can't even remember which guy actually took over for him from him, but Jimbo was responsible for the demise of the Florida State program. It started with him.
Right.
I mean, he didn't get it all the way to where it is now, but
I got a question.
But it began with that.
Who would you hire?
You got 2.
Oh, man. This is not a long. All right. Real quick. Who would you take today as your head coach? Kirby Smart, Jimbo Fisher, or Ed Ogeron?
I'd go with Kirby.
Would you really?
Yeah.
You have to.
Yeah.
Interesting. But just a little bit over Jimbo or a lot?
The reason is because, look, I just told you what I feel about Jimbo's ability to establish a great offense. Kirby is going to establish a great defense. He just has to hire the right offensive coordinator. I don't think Jimbo is going to hire an offensive coordinator to come in and give him free reign to do whatever he needs. So I'd say there's a better chance of Kirby one day having an explosive offense.
Okay.
Than, better chance than there's of Jimbo doing it.
All right, Brad Edwards, new book, Dynasty by the Numbers.
Now, if Coach O hires Joe Brady, then
You can go to the website, BamaDynastyBook.com. Are you ready to put it on record? You believe Mississippi State will win Saturday, 28-14?
State A&M? Yeah.
First 1 to 20?
No. I'm not taking State.
All right. Brad Edwards, appreciate it, buddy. Thanks for coming in studio. 25 years at ESPN. Dynasty by the Numbers is the new book. And you can find it BamaDynastyBook.com. BamaDynastyBook.com. Are we heading out to the Sanderson Farms Championship? I think we are. Sounds like a big day at the course. The Out of Bounds Show, 105.9 The Zone ESPN, brought to you by the New York Style Pizza at Sal and Mookie's in Madison and in Jackson. The New York Style Pizza and their game day wings at Sal and Mookie's in Madison and Jackson. And they also have Modelo on tap. We'll see you tomorrow.